Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Pitton. I'm the director of the Senior Center that you are in right at the moment. We are glad to host this event this afternoon. I want to do a few housekeeping things. First of all, if you've never been here in the Senior Center, I see a lot of familiar faces, so this may not be pertinent, but I want you to know that the Senior Center is open to anybody 50 and up, so you may be more eligible than you think. And we host a weekly community lunch. We have 45 classes that happen here every week. We have drop-in groups, 15 drop-in groups that are free of charge. You don't have to be a member to do the drop-in groups here. So we have a newsletter that's out on the front counter if you're interested in seeing what's coming up. Well, it's this month. So that would be a great thing to pick up if you're interested in finding out more about this senior center. Having said that, now I get to do tell you where the bathrooms are, which is very important information. There is a bathroom right around this orange corner here. It's a single bathroom, okay? That one's easiest probably for the people on that side of the room.
And it's for disabled.
Yes, all of them are handicap accessible. Yep, all of them are. And then if you want gendered bathrooms, you go down this hallway, take a left, look for the picture, the black and white picture of the lovely little old lady on the wall. There's a sign below it that says restrooms. The men's room is the first one on the left. The ladies' room is the second room on the left, the door on the left. And if the fire alarm goes off, which it's never done in the 2 years I've worked here, so that would be surprising to me as well. The way you can get out, this is the fastest exit. This is not a handicap exit, though. So if you need a handicap exit, you will go out the way you came in. So I hope you enjoy this program, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let me know if I actually am speaking correctly into the mic. This is not, okay. Okay, first I want to thank everybody who is here today. I know we have a lot on our plates, and it can feel like a reach for some of us to focus our attention on Israel and Palestine when there are so many urgent and terrifying things that are going on right here. My name is Miriam Hansen. I co-founded Montpelier Indivisible 7 years ago, and I want to thank the advisory group for trusting me to put this event together under the group sponsorship. It wasn't an easy decision. I would like to be clear, this was my idea and mine alone. Any complaints anybody has, they come to me. Thanks to everybody who's been helping to set up for this. And thanks to Jordan Souder from the Vermont ACLU, who agreed to co-sponsor the event and help with the post-film discussion. I particularly want to thank Amy Pitton, the Senior Center Director, for agreeing to rent us this space. It was a brave and a generous decision, given how divisive and difficult it is to have a discussion that touches Israel and Palestine. Enormous thanks to Matt Wilson for jumping in to be our tech person, to my husband David, who always supports me, and special thanks to Just Vision and Daniel Nierenberg for coming all the way from Kentucky to share his deep knowledge and to educate us about a situation that is beyond horrifying to so many people, regardless of affiliation. You will notice a couple of donation jars. They are eager to see your cash. And there are also 2 QR codes, or many QR codes, thanks to Wendy, for those who only carry cards. Your donations are going to help us cover the cost of Daniel's flight to and from Kentucky and for rental of this space. Anything that we receive over those costs, we will donate to MAP, which is Medical Assistance for Palestinians. And please give generously. Our help is so desperately needed. Today's agenda is very straightforward. I'll give this introduction. It will be followed by a prayer on the half sheet that was given out, and then I'll introduce Daniel, who will introduce the film, and then he and Jordan will lead the discussion. I am a Jew born in Montreal. I was raised in a Zionist family. My paternal grandparents were born in Palestine, and like so many Jews of my generation, I was taught the Zionist narrative by the people I loved best, my parents. As a young adult, I worked with people who were much more political than I. The people here can't believe that, but trust me. And we agreed on everything except Israel. And they knew they couldn't talk to me about Israel. Many years ago, Just Vision's founder, Ronit Avni, held a film screening in Stowe. And she not only turned out to be another Jew from Montreal, but also she was the daughter of a young Judea camp counselor at the camp that I went to when I was 10 years old. I had found someone, finally, that I could trust. But it still wasn't an easy journey. It took me 15 years to understand that the narrative that I was taught about the founding of Israel was far from true. We were told that the over 700,000 Palestinians who fled did so because their imams urged them to, promising they would throw the Jews into the sea and then they would come back. And this isn't what happened. Our own Israeli historians agree that Israel carried out extensive, violent ethnic cleansing. The only disagreement between them is whether that violent expulsion was justifiable. In this moment, we're watching a genocide unfolding in real time. I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. I know that silence is complicity. I want to build a bridge. It needs to work for people who never heard of BDS and people whose life centers around this never-ending horror. I wanted to make a safe space that we could all inhabit and learn about the laws in this country that prohibit us from exercising our First Amendment rights, the right to protest. I can't and won't make excuses for my people, but they are my people. And I understand the many people in my own family and community who cling to the narrative we were taught, because I did the same. But I also know that Israel and those of us who continue to stand with Israel no matter what are committing and enabling terrible crimes. So that question, what can I do? That's my feather for courage. This is what I can do. I have a relationship with Just Vision. I co-founded Montpelier Indivisible. I could convince the ACLU to co-sponsor the event. I could ask Daniel Nirenberg to come from Kentucky. And I could do one more thing. I could gather a small group to sing the prayer, the 13 attributes of God, Adonai, Adonai, Avraham v'Nachum. This is the liturgy we sing on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when the gates of heaven are open, in the days of awe, a song that we sing in synagogue when we are asking God to forgive our transgressions, when we sing to the God of compassion, Racham, Rachmones, one of the central tenets of Judaism. This idea came to me after seeing a video 20 years ago of Palestinians with work permits being processed over a period of hours, crammed into chutes like cattle, dehumanized, waiting for hours to go to their jobs in Israel, unable to move because of the limited space and the numbers of them. Every day, this was their experience. And I felt so ashamed. I wondered, what might grab attention? What would pierce hearts and minds to the inhumanity of how we were treating them? And I thought, what if we could surround those chutes and sing the 13 attributes of God to remind our fellow Jews and ourselves about what it means to be a Jew, to be steeped in those values, and to fill the air around those chutes with the sound of us supporting them. I want to pierce hearts and minds, and I want to build a bridge. It is not a simple or easy thing to do. I shared this idea with Rami El-Hanan and Bassam Aramin, two of the Israeli and Palestinian founders of the Parent Circle. Rami said, "We don't need a gesture. We need international pressure." Okay, let's show the film Boycott. Bassam sent me a heart and his blessing. And I asked Wafik Fower, who is here today, about the idea. He told me he was, in general, not a big fan of showing films. That made me so hopeful. Maybe he'd tell me this event was a bad idea. But he said, no, good idea. So I had to do it. I want to thank Shana and Ron and Sarah for a lot of things, but in particular for agreeing to stand up here in front of all of you with me and sing this song and bare our hearts. It is an offering. It is what we can do. So we're doing it. We'll sing the song twice. It's very short. Then I'll introduce Daniel. What did I do? Can you hold the mic? Okay. You hit it.
Okay. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, v'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed le'alafim, Nosei
Now I'm going to introduce Daniel. Daniel lives in Kentucky with his family. He is the Education and Communication Specialist for Just Vision, which is an organization that fills a media gap on Israel-Palestine, and the creators of the film will be watching today. Daniel has been immersed in all things Israel-Palestine for decades, having worked and studied in the region for several years. He has a PhD in political science from George Washington University, and he speaks regularly on college campuses about Israel-Palestine.
Thank you, Miriam. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is an amazing turnout, and Miriam for your fearless and dedicated organizing and for filling the room. So grateful for everybody that has worked to make this possible, and for Jordan and the ACLU for being here as well. I'm going to let the film speak for itself. We're going to have a good amount of time after the film for a question and answer period, and really, hopefully, for just discussion amongst us. We'll set some framework for how we can have a conversation afterwards, some agreements maybe that we can collectively make, and if anybody disagrees with what I propose as those agreements, we can talk about that as well. And otherwise, yeah, I think we should just start the film and continue from there. Okay, thank you everybody for being here and for staying for the discussion afterwards. Oh, that's funny, I wrote down a couple of sort of agreements that I thought we could follow, and then I didn't bring my phone up here. Do we all agree that, so there are quite a few people in the room. If we can keep our comments and questions reasonably short so that everybody has an opportunity to express their voice, that's one thing. I want people to feel passionate. I want people to share whatever they want to be sharing, and I want this to feel like it's a safe and a courageous space for people to do so. So I ask that we be true to ourselves, and when we hear people whose opinions we don't agree with, that we agree not to speak over them. And so we give people their time to speak. We listen with curiosity. Yeah.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate seeing this, because I wasn't aware that it was the states that are banning boycotting. Because that, like in the last paragraph, was saying
Yeah.
boycotting anything of a demonstration.
Yeah.
Any mass movement which starts with the people.
Yeah, I'm going to give like a follow-up on where the cases are in a little bit. I want to be able to start this Q&A with sort of understanding where we are. Yeah, Miriam? Yeah.
We are not going to speak without a microphone, any of us. I'm sitting next to somebody who can't hear, and I can't hear either. So I'm going to remind these two young gentlemen.
Thanks. Yeah, I will. So before I give an update on where the legislation is today, there's a lot of literature here. There's literature from the ACLU. There's literature from Just Vision, where I work. Indivisible. Montpelier Indivisible over there. What's the other literature over here other than Just Vision and ACLU?
It's the list of...
Oh, and we have a list of organizations for those who are sort of wanting to explore more about Israel-Palestine. This is a very, very non-exhaustive list of organizations that are doing important work on various different pieces: human rights, legal work, coexistence work. It is not an endorsement. Miriam and I sort of put this list together. It is not an endorsement of those organizations. We're putting them together simply so that folks can follow up on it.
You can sign if you want to hear more from, I think it's just...
From Just Vision, yes, that's right. We have our sign-up sheet here. If you prefer to do so on your phone, there's a QR code that you can scan as well. Okay, so quickly, so I work with Just Vision. We're a nonprofit. We fill a media gap on Israel-Palestine. We do so through documentary filmmaking. We've done 5 films, including Boycott. We're now working on our 6th film. We also have several journalism projects. So we have a Hebrew language news outlet called Local Call. We've broken what I think are some of the most important investigations on Israel's conduct in Gaza, as well as activities in the West Bank and settler violence and military-supported settler violence in the West Bank. We have a new project called the Palestine Reporting Lab, and our upcoming film, which I can share a little bit about later, was somewhat coincidentally, this is not what we intended to cover, but it is going to be covering Zora Mamdani and some of the early activism when he was a state assemblyman, along with other organizers and activists who were trying to pass a bill called the pass a bill that was essentially looking at New York charitable organizations and their support for settlement organizations. I realize actually we might need to edit that piece out because I'm not sure how public we are ready to go on that. I know as I said it, I was like, oh, I don't know if we've actually shared that in a newsletter yet. Regardless, we are covering Zora Mamdani. That is public knowledge at this point. Most of our films covered grassroots organizers in the region, and after our last film, which was Nala and the Uprising, which looked at women's leadership during the first Intifada, we started to notice a lot of these trends around suppressing Palestinian rights advocates internationally, certainly within Israel, but also internationally. And we started to notice these anti-boycott laws were passing, and we noticed they were passing under the radar. We knew we had a story to tell when individuals started suing their states. And so this was a very logical story for us to tell to help Americans understand that what's happening in Israel-Palestine is it's taking place right here in our backyards, and that our state legislators are taking this issue up in a way that is actually stripping us away of our right to speak. And the film came out in 2021. Every single time I watch it since then, I'm struck by how relevant it remains today, maybe even more so relevant in the last couple of years. And the laws, so unfortunately with Alan Leverett's case, the film came out in 2021. In 2023, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that boycott is a purely commercial act and not expressive speech, which goes against decades and decades of legal precedent. The ACLU then appealed that to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court declined to hear his case. So we remain in a bit of a limbo situation in which the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which represents, 5 or 6 states in the middle of the country, is in disagreement with the Supreme Court ruling of 1982, NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware. They didn't really explain all that much why they decided not to hear the case. It might actually be to our benefit as Americans or as residents of the United States that this Supreme Court did not hear this. We don't know what they would have done with it. Regardless, it might still end up at the Supreme Court. And I'll just say briefly that a Texas court actually just struck down another anti-boycott law that prevented financial institutions from boycotting fossil fuel industry, or actually from including any ESG measures in their financial considerations. So the fact that a Texas judge struck down that law is opening up for the possibility for another. They're in the Fifth Circuit. So there's a possibility that circuit courts might disagree. At that point, the Supreme Court might follow up on it. So there were 33 states when we launched this film. There are now 38 states. You'll see 37 in some places. There's one state that has an anti-boycott law that is not quite legally binding, but other sources consider it to be an anti-boycott law as well. So 37 to 38 states. There are still laws that are being introduced. New Jersey and New York are at the forefront of this, especially in the last 2 years. They're introducing more laws that are trying to prevent academic institutions that receive state funding from engaging in an academic boycott. So this is part of the broader environment of the government essentially trying to control speech on campuses and punish specifically Palestinian rights activists. So the laws are still moving forward. I'm going to provide some hopeful news as we get into the discussion as well, because there is movement, I think, in a positive direction around these laws as well. I'll leave it at that. I want to pass it on to Jordan so he can share a little bit about why the ACLU came in as a co-sponsor of this particular event and how the ACLU is viewing these laws today.
Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Jordan Souder. I'm a policy advocate for the ACLU Vermont. And just a little background about what I do is largely I work in the State House advocating for laws that help promote and defend our civil rights and liberties and fight off against laws that seek to do the opposite. So, I'm not going to say anything particularly new that I thought the film did a beautiful job of articulating. The right to boycott has been such a fundamental staple in American politics and American democracy, from the Boston Tea Party to the Montgomery bus boycotts to boycotting the apartheid in South Africa. And not only is it one of the most fundamental aspects of our free speech that the Supreme Court has affirmed, is protected under the First Amendment, it is also one of the most powerful, it is one of the most effective tools that we have in effectuating change, right? Our civil rights movement would not be where it is without things like our right to boycott and the right to express ourselves. And it is deeply troubling when we see all these anti-BDS movements and anti-boycott laws popping up all across the country in both red and blue states. So we are here to help defend and promote people's right to express themselves regardless of their viewpoint. And the First Amendment was intended to combat against viewpoint discrimination in the first place. So that is why we felt it was important to help spread awareness around this. And luckily, here in Vermont, we're not seeing any legislation focusing on anti-boycotting. And so we think Vermont has a unique opportunity to contact our legislators, our local leaders, and say that Vermont, we are going to affirm our right to freedom of speech, our right to boycott, and petition our governments with any grievances that we have. So happy to answer any further questions, and if folks want to get involved, reach out.
So I think we just open it up to conversation and questions if folks have right now. Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I'll stay sitting because you can hear me, but thank you for hosting this event. Thank you to Miriam for putting it together. I'm here as a member of apartheid-free Montpelier. We have Article 12 on the ballot this March 3rd, which would be give Montpelier the opportunity to divest municipal funds from Israel as it's committing apartheid. And we have experienced a lot of pushback and a lot of claims that this type of legislation would be divisive or anti-Semitic. And I'm wondering if there's anyone who would like to talk with us about that more, or what your guys' perspective is on municipal divestment and boycotts.
I can't speak to what's happening here in Vermont because I'm not as familiar with it. I have heard about the apartheid-free zones. Look, I think that what was discussed in the film, and what probably most of us in this room can agree, is that how we use our pocketbook matters. And we know that apartheid in South Africa fell for many reasons, but one of them was the international pressure and divestment campaigns. Divestment is a really powerful tool. I think state sanctions are a little bit more questionable. They've had very mixed results internationally. I mean, the sanctions against Iraq were a disaster. So I feel personally a little bit more conflicted about the effect of sanctions, but divestments we know are very powerful tools. And in fact, yeah, so I think it's wonderful that you guys are doing that. I hear it's passed in 5 other towns, is that right? Which is great. And yeah, I mean, the charge of anti-Semitism is, I think, where a lot of the movement is moving right now, the movement to defend the state of Israel. They are weaponizing, in my opinion, anti-Semitism, charges of anti-Semitism, and they're using it in order to silence folks. And nobody wants to be called an anti-Semite, right? And so a lot of people, and I speak on campuses a lot, students are terrified to criticize Israel because they're afraid that they're going to be called anti-Semitic. So they can't even have these kinds of conversations. To call Israel an apartheid state, in my opinion, there is absolutely nothing anti-Semitic about describing a particular political situation that you think looks an awful lot like apartheid. And not just that you think looks like apartheid, but that organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Palestinian organizations, Israeli organization, B'Tselem has called an apartheid state, right? So I think it takes courage to be able to do the work that you're doing and face the charges of anti-Semitism because it can potentially destroy reputations. I do think that folks are realizing more and more that those charges of anti-Semitism are usually empty words, but it's dangerous, right? Like we have what's happening I guess internationally as well, but especially at the state and the federal level here in the United States is that they're those who are advocating for the state of Israel and lobbying for the state of Israel are trying to pass the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which the authors have always claimed was never meant to be used the way that it's being used. And that definition includes several cases of criticizing the state of Israel and deems those cases of anti-Semitism. That's incredibly dangerous. And the Anti-Defamation League, which a lot of people rely on for their statistics on anti-Semitism, includes most criticism of Israel as cases of anti-Semitism. So they say that anti-Semitism is rapidly on the rise here in this country. We don't know if that's true because we're relying on the ADL statistics of it, and the ADL includes a definition that is highly controversial and quite possibly just wrong. And so we have to be careful with that because there is anti-Semitism in this country. It is on the rise, but not necessarily, and very often not, in criticism of Israel. And so it confuses folks. And so we don't know what is anti-Semitism anymore, and I think it's deliberately meant to be confusing people. So I think that what you're doing is fantastic. I wish you luck here. I certainly, I work for a nonprofit. We do no lobbying of state senators, right? But I really, yeah. But like on a personal level, I support the kinds of initiatives that you're doing. I think they're really important. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
If there is, this is just...
Say your name and how people can...
Okay. My name is Allie. You can reach out to me or Marlene or Wafiq after this if you'd like to learn more or get in contact with us. And I would just ask one thing, that if you do have a sense that this would be something that you think would be valuable for Montpelier, that you would use your voice on Front Porch Forum, because we are experiencing a lot of one-sided talk there.
Hi, my name is Steve from Montpelier. I just want to take on the... Am I too far away? Okay, I wanted to raise the issue of the divisiveness claim. I think that's not a very strong claim. To me, divisiveness sometimes is necessary when you're dealing with a morally important issue. If you think back to the civil rights movement, there were people at the time who said civil rights is a divisive issue for our country. Well, it's probably true that it was divisive, but it wasn't a strong argument because that work needed to be done, that those changes needed to happen. The same is true with slavery. Slavery was a very divisive issue in our country. We had a civil war. So try to keep in mind that although we all would like to avoid divisiveness, sometimes it's a necessary part of making important changes.
Thank you. I'm Jackie. I was wondering if you can comment on the statement from river to the sea. And like, to me, they're two separate issues in a way. Like the film was about boycotting or anti-boycotting, and then the last scene, that's something different to me. That hits me in a different way. And yeah, I'm curious what you all have to say about that.
Thanks for the question, Jackie. Yeah, you know, this has been a really interesting thing for me to watch the people's response to that placard at the very end of this film. Always a question that comes up. And especially more so since October 2023, when From the River to the Sea was being used as a slogan. So I will remind you that Likud's founding document refers to Jewish control over the land from the river to the sea. I will remind you that the only power in the region that does have the opportunity to control the land from the river to the sea is the state of Israel and the Israeli military. All of the laws that are passed from the river to the sea, and when B'Tselem refers to Israel as an apartheid state, they are calling it an apartheid state from the river to the sea. So they're talking about Israeli control over the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Israel proper, and the Gaza Strip. And that terminology is, you know, it's terminology that is mostly being used by Palestinians right now, but in practice, it is the state of Israel that has control over the entire area. I think that folks use From the River to the Sea in different ways, and they also use the terminology Palestine will be free in different ways. For some activists, that might mean that they believe the full removal of every single Israeli Jew from the land, from the river to the sea. I don't know very many Palestinian rights activists that firmly believe that. There are some, but I would say the vast majority are talking about ending a particular regime of Jewish supremacy from the river to the sea. That's my understanding of it. That's how I hear activists use it. I obviously cannot speak for every person that's ever said From the River to the Sea, but my understanding of it is one in which they are trying to free the entire land from the river to the sea to a discriminatory regime that's been described as apartheid. And I understand that is an uncomfortable one. You know, like we're talking about the question of divisiveness. I think of these things as they're uncomfortable. For the longest time, calling what Israel was doing in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem an occupation was divisive and controversial. Very few people still think that is a controversial claim. Then for the longest time, it was apartheid. You can't use the word apartheid because it's going to ruffle people's feathers. It's a triggering word. Now suddenly we've got a whole bunch of international organizations that are acknowledging that this is apartheid, acknowledging what Palestinians have been saying for decades, but now that Amnesty and B'Tselem and Human Rights Watch are saying it, it's safe for everybody else to call it an apartheid state. I would say the same thing for the word genocide. There were some Israeli scholars that within 2 weeks were calling it a genocide, and folks were saying, it's not a genocide, you can't say that, the evidence isn't in. Now genocide is a much less controversial term. Certainly very few politicians are going to refer to it as a genocide. But you know, the population, those who are watching it, as well as international legal bodies, have said that the evidence lines up, that both the rhetoric and the actions demonstrate that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. So I sort of, I understand why From the River to the Sea is something that makes people uncomfortable, because they're viewing it through the lens of, well, what you're talking about is the ethnic cleansing of all Jews from the land of historic Palestine. I'm sure some people use it in that way. It's entirely possible. They have the right to use it in that way, in part because, there's, when we're looking at the sort of hypocrisy of calling out that particular slogan as being the worst slogan, when the practice of the Israeli government, the Israeli state, and the Israeli military is full control from the river to the sea. So. Yeah.
And then just to add to that, the Black Lives Matter movement, similarly to the Palestinian movement, was also, the Black Lives Matter movement have been called a terrorist organization, have been called, antagonizers. And so, many people said that the BLM movement was threatening, even though it was the black community exercising the right, and to say that the government is systematically targeting us as if our lives don't matter. And so it was just trying to assert that, we have rights, we are here, and we will, basically won't stand for this level of discrimination anymore. So similarly to what that one of the commentators in the movie was saying, is that you do see a lot of parallels between the Palestinian movement and the BLM movement as well. So just kind of keeping that through the context of like what we've experienced already in the United States here as well.
I'll just say one other thing is that slogans are not policy. Like slogans are also, they're meant to increase our engagement on a particular issue. And sometimes slogans are deliberately meant to push buttons so that we can have the conversation.
But it's speech.
And it's speech, yeah, exactly, yeah.
I've raised my
Yeah.
hand for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Hi, I'm Tammy Calliope, and something that's bothered me for a while, and it's sort of coming together, having listened to you, is it almost seems like, making it political and also religious and cultural by doing Israel, Palestine, when actually what it is genocide. It's genocide, and it's been meant to be genocide from the beginning, and Netanyahu has said, yeah, he wants every Palestinian, exactly, from the river to the sea, to be gone, 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 and he said that many times. Now, this is not, this is not rare in the world. I mean, that's how America began, was with genocide of the native peoples and slavery. I mean, two kinds of genocide is still trying to go on here, and ever more so. So I just feel like, why don't, for a while people were talking about crimes against humanity and genocide, but that's gotten lost in, to me it seems like it's gotten lost in these, anti-Semitic or, what. It's more than that. It's like any human being is doing to a whole collective of human beings, trying to wipe out their seed, so that they can never inhabit the earth again, is just something everybody could get behind if they just understand it that way. And I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I agree, it has been an impetus from the very start of the founding of the State of Israel. And I would say that Israeli colonization or Jewish colonization of Palestine was happening as the rest of the colonial powers were decolonizing. And that is, from the Israeli perspective, bad luck. Because had they done that 200 years prior, they could have eliminated the entire population. And they could have been living in peace right now, because they would have eliminated or ethnically cleansed the entire population. I think Miriam mentioned this at the beginning in her opening remarks. There is right now a consensus by Israeli historians that there was ethnic cleansing in 1948. The only disagreement is whether it was justified or not, and whether they went far enough or not. right? And you'll hear plenty of Israeli politicians, mostly on the right, say that the problem is they didn't go far enough. And in fact, if you ever watch 1948 Creation and Catastrophe, it's a phenomenal documentary film. There is a story of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine during 1948. They talk about what happened in Lod. They talk about what happened in a couple of other places. And in Nazareth, there was a Canadian general who was volunteering on behalf of the fledgling Israeli army, pre-Israeli army, who was a Christian. And he was tasked with kicking the Palestinians out of Nazareth, a historically Christian Palestinian city. And he declined to do it. And he said, I'm not going to do that. This is going to be a terrible PR move for you internationally if you ethnically cleanse Christians. And he didn't. And I believe it was when Ben Gurion arrived to Nazareth and saw that the Palestinian population was still there, he was shocked and he said, why are there still so many Palestinians here right now? So I really encourage you to watch Creation and Catastrophe. It's a really phenomenal film. It has testimonials from Israeli soldiers, from Haganah soldiers during the time, offering testimonials. Some of them with remorse, some of them not with remorse. Some of them expressing that we didn't go far enough because look at the situation that we're in right now. And I think the reality of Israel is that it is premised on, it was born out of the pogroms, out of European anti-Semitism that was virulent and nasty. This is even long before the Holocaust that Zionism was taking off. The Holocaust drove the point home for the Jews that believed that the only way for Jews to be safe was with a state of their own, with their own borders, their own military, their ability to control their own destiny further down the road. The only way for that to happen is for it to be an exclusively Jewish state. And so Jewish supremacy was built into, I think this is another one of those terms that's very uncomfortable for people. I hear it being used a lot more amongst Israeli leftist activists to refer to Jewish supremacy as the thing that they are fighting against. And it is the belief of, this notion that Jews have more right to this land, that Jews have to, it's not necessarily Jews are better, it's that Jews have more right to this land than any other group of people. And so we have to do whatever we can to maintain our control over this piece of land. And the only ways that you can do that, if you're following the natural progression of Zionism, is you either push all Palestinians out, right, which we have seen elements of in 1948 and in 1967, as well as in the way that they're dealing with Palestinian herding communities right now, or you kill them en masse, which Israel is having a hard time doing without a ton of international pressure, but 70,000 is an incredibly high number of individuals being killed, the vast, vast majority of them being citizens, or you control them, which is where we have the apartheid state. And so, again, coming back to this notion of from the river to the sea, this is about undoing a regime. This is not about eliminating the state of Israel. This is about undoing a regime that is fundamentally about the exclusion of one group over the other or the control over that particular group. I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I rambled a little bit there.
No.
Wafiq?
I think you answered it beautifully. My name is Wafiq, and I am one of the people who go on the street and scream from the river to the sea. The reason for it, I can start it by saying, it's no way there is a freedom for the Palestinians without freedom of the Jewish who are living there, who are tied into an oppression regime. To free ourselves, the Palestinians, we have even to free our enemy from that mentality. And when we go and say BDS or we say apartheid free, we liberating ourselves and the oppressor too. So I'm going to steal a word from another Palestinian. It's an act of love. Because nobody going to throw anybody out. Nobody can throw anybody out. And there is no survival for us or for the Jewish over there without coming to a point to oppose ethnic cleansing, genocide, apartheid. And there is a duty for the American who are supporting peace over there to stand with us. It's true there is no BDS, anti-BDS law in Vermont, but there is H310, which is IHRA definition, a new definition of anti-Semitism. It means if I call for BDS, which is we did it with Ben and Jerry, and now you see Ben Cohen and Jerry, how they stand with justice, completely than 13 years ago. Because we transfer it. BDS was act of love, and they understood it. But if IHRA have become a law here in Vermont, this gathering will be illegal.
Yes.
Airing this film will be illegal.
Yes.
So let's think together. If you want peace, stand with anti-apartheid laws. If you want peace, we have to stand together. There is a lot of difference. Judaism doesn't talk about hate. So let's stand against hate. Let's do it. We can do it.
I am Shauna, and I'm from Montpelier, and I want there not to be a zero-sum game here. I want to believe that Israel is also oppressed by our oppression by the oppression of the Palestinians. I don't like the word apartheid because it raises everybody's hackles. But there is no doubt that Israel is very oppressive to the Palestinians. And I clearly do not believe that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. I am very upset about how the administration of the United States is weaponizing the word anti-Semitism. I don't think they really care about anti-Semitism. I think they want to use that word because everybody is afraid of it. And I have to say that I hope that that Article 12, or I hope it loses again. I really do. It is frightening to me as a Jew that article, which I don't think helps the Palestinians, I think it just makes Jews feel bad, is frightening. It feels scary to me that is on the ballot, and it would feel frightening if it passed. So I want that, I want to say that way. And I do not support actually boycotting Israel, because there are a whole lot of good things that, if a college campus boycotts Israel, then they will boycott the peaceniks also. There are a few around. They will boycott the people who the parents of children killed, who have discussions, who care about each other, the Palestinian parents and the Jewish parents. They will boycott the groups that are looking for coexistence. So. And they'll boycott my medicine that I get, because Israel has excellent medical research, and I don't want to boycott Israel because baclofin's really good for me. There are other things. So I guess that's all. I don't want there to be such a clear zero-sum game that if the Palestinians win, the Jews lose, and if the Jews win, the Palestinians lose. I think we're all losing now, and I would like us all to win. So.
Yeah, let's move it back first. Yeah, and then you can pass it to the front to you.
My name's Tori. I also live here in Montpelier. One of the major things I appreciated about Miriam organizing this program is the vigorous effort to bring people with different experiences and different points of view into the same room to nurture a dialogue. I'm very, very appreciative of that. Last week we were also at the gathering at the library to learn more about Article 12, and I was very struck by the commitment and idealism and great youngness of the few people who seem to be organizing this campaign this year. Apparently a different set of people than last year, since this is Montpelier and young people come and go. I do want to say, first of all, just that as an ancient activist, I feel that one of our really big jobs as activists, as people who've lived through a lot of things, is to nurture and support younger activists and to be in conversation with them and to create conversations like the one that Miriam has invited all of us to. I don't know to what extent the folks organizing the campaign this year understand how well organized and well funded the opposition was last year. And I'm assuming from the signs I've seen and stuff I've seen in Front Porch Forum that it's equivalently well organized and well funded this year. The information about funding in the film actually brought to my attention how much I see this as a profoundly moral issue and how little attention I've paid to where is the funding coming from. After we got anonymous leaflets dumped at our house in the middle of the night last year telling us to vote against Article 13, I finally was able to trace that back to, they were generated by the Shalom Alliance and they just hadn't signed their names. But then the same leaflets came out again and they were signed that time. I think that anybody, I don't have a strong feeling about Article 12 one way or the other, but I do feel that anybody working to support it needs not to be naive about this is not just a moral opposition, this is a highly organized opposition. And I think it would be probably very interesting to look at where is the funding for the Shalom Alliance and any other organizations that are supporting the opposition. You guys are doing such good work. Such good work is what seems to be a small community of people, and you've got to understand that this is like the young person up against the tank in Tiananmen Square. We need to understand what the tank is. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. I know.
Oh, she did. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My question too, I'm Ann Charles from Montpelier, and my question is pretty simple. What towns, I'm kind of uninformed, what towns in Vermont have passed legislation like this?
Thetford is one. Thetford.
Brattleboro,
Winooski.
Stepford, Thetford, Brattleboro, Winooski, Plainfield. Great, thank you very much.
And it's on the ballot in Hartford. In Hartford also. Most of Madawi is supporting it very publicly. Great, thank you.
So I'm not sure if my question will completely break the conversation here. I wanted to know. Stand up? Okay. Susan Messner. Are there more cases now that there, instead of not just 25 states, but there are now 28 states? Are you seeing more cases of people challenging this and kind of what the status of that is? I'd love to know, what that is. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the hopeful piece that I wanted to. Okay. Can I answer that one quickly and then we'll go back? Yeah. because I feel like there were 3 comments there, and I want to see if we can get to them. So let's see. There have been a couple of other cases that courts have declined to hear because they didn't have legal standing. But really what we're seeing right now is what I would come close to calling a repeal movement. So there have been repeal efforts in Texas. There are repeal efforts in Arizona underway, in Missouri, which was very surprising to me, Michigan, Illinois. Maybe a couple of, did I mention Colorado? Anyways, there are several repeal efforts. So some of them they were introduced, they didn't get very far, they were defeated. There are a couple of other organizers that we know of across the country that are starting to introduce repeal efforts. So these are very simple bills calling for repealing the anti-boycott legislation. They're doing so on free speech grounds. These are not even necessarily being organized by those who are advocating for Palestinian rights. This is like a First Amendment rights issue, and they're organizing really effectively. And I'm quite moved by that. I track the legislation as it comes in. There are fewer and fewer efforts at passing anti-boycott legislation, at least as it relates to Israel. There are more and more repeal efforts. Some of them haven't introduced their legislation yet. They're organizing, and they're doing so very thoughtfully. So they're bringing in as many legislators as they can. They're bringing in Republican legislators as well as Democratic legislators, and they're trying to present this as a bipartisan issue to preserve our right to free speech. So this is one very encouraging piece. Another thing that some states are doing proactively is they are passing or attempting to pass laws that basically state, plain and simple, boycott is a First Amendment protected right, and we, the state of X, affirm that boycott is a First Amendment right. So I think that those kinds of initiatives are encouraging. We're seeing a slow shift. And I think part of that has to do with the last couple of years. It is getting harder and harder for Israel's defenders to defend what Israel is doing because the world is seeing what is unfolding right in front of their eyes. And so there is a shift. There's a shift in public opinion that's really quite drastic, not just among young Democratic voters, but also some Republican voters. And there's also a really big ideological shift happening in the Christian evangelical scene. This notion of the return of Christ premised on the return of Jews to the land of Israel was really introduced and popularized in the 1970s, and it became a really, really big movement. Pastors started pushing it, and it was strong up until a couple of years ago. And slowly, pastors are dropping that narrative. They're not millennial anymore. They're not talking about end of times anymore. The church is centering itself around a different set of values and norms and ideologies. Obviously still rooted in Christian evangelicalism, but that particular piece is starting to recede. And what you're seeing is that young Christian evangelicals are far less likely to support or love the state of Israel for no reason than because their pastor told them to. And the numbers are striking. I mean, I'm not good at remembering numbers, but it was something along the lines of 33% support for the state of Israel among younger Christian evangelicals and 67% among older Christian evangelicals. So I think we'll continue to see a change. And by the way, I think that there's some danger with that. For those of you who watch the right and how the right is, some elements of the right are turning against Israel, like Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, plenty of the things that they say are not just verging on anti-Semitic, they are straight up anti-Semitic. And so we have to be really careful as organizers and activists to not cheer on the fact that the right is standing up for Palestinian rights if they're doing it in the same breath as spreading anti-Semitic vitriol. And so, I think that's our responsibility as well for those of us in the room who fall into that category. There's a question back. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Miriam.
Sorry, I just want to explain why I keep trying to get people to stand up. So this is being filmed by Orca, and so I want to make as much of this available to other people as I can. So when you ask a question, please talk loud. I am deaf as a doornail, and stand up. Thank you.
My name is Eric Bachman. I live in Barrie. I am very glad that this has been organized, Miriam, especially it's about boycotts and all the other things that we have said about this. I'd like to share a couple of experiences about boycotts on both sides. In the 70s, I lived and worked as a peace activist in Europe, mainly in Germany, and we boycotted products from South Africa. The Outspan Orange was the one that I was very involved in organizing. Several years later, 1981, I'm a trainer in nonviolent civil resistance. I was invited to go to South Africa to work with the anti-apartheid movement there for 4 months. And I discovered that even though it wasn't a huge group in Europe, it was very well known that that boycott was taking place. It really got to the roots of the people in that country. And so it does work. And it's very important that we have the ability to do that. And I'm very upset that these civil rights are being taken away from us. They weren't in the original Constitution. They were in the Bill of Rights. They were added later. And they are so important. And I'm glad to hear that there's more and more states where people are working to get rid of this anti-boycott legislation. It is so important. I think that and other types of actions to support our own civil rights are, especially at this moment, very, very important.
Hi, my name is Sarah, full-time Jew, and and I am Jewish as my job, so I manage a synagogue, and it's been great. And so I just wanted to share, because I know there are either people struggling with their Judaism in this space that wanted to support this and support Montpelier and Indivisible. There's a teaching in Judaism that if you save a life, it is as though you have saved the whole world, and so that is very. It's an immediate conflict for any kind of observant Jew. I'm not going to cry. For any kind of observant Jew that is affected by what is going on in Palestine and in Gaza. And so it's difficult to be, I've been called a self-hating Jew, which is or not a Jew at all, which is very interesting because the great Leonard Cohen said that anybody that says you are not a Jew is not a Jew. So catch-22 there. But also, I just wanted to share that for Jews that are in this space, that are feeling that on the day-to-day. Of course.
Mary might have a point of understanding.
If I can only remember what I wanted to say. So I guess I'm responding to the point about the river to the sea kind of being a bit like a knife between the ribs. And what I talked about in my introduction about being taught a certain narrative, in the narrative that we were taught, the idea of the Jews being thrown into the sea by the Palestinians, like, you know, at this point, looking at that statement, it kind of feels insane, but when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and that's the story, then anybody saying from the river to the sea makes you nervous, you know, because that's your wallpaper. And it's the same about BDS. You know, I mean, BDS in the Jewish community I grew up in is a very bad word. My mother said the F word. Like, you know, it was shocking. She was an old lady, but she did. But BDS, no, you couldn't say that. Because, again, it's conditioning. So I think really part of what I was hoping would happen here is that we could look at our conditioning. We could understand. We were taught a narrative that we believed, but the narrative wasn't true. It's kind of like the narrative that we're taught to a lot of white people about black people, or taught to everybody about Native people. You know, at a certain point in that way, maybe Daniel and I have a slightly different point of view. He is less excited about the coexistence groups. For me, you have to start somewhere. It's a long journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's difficult. It's very difficult to go against the people you love best, you know. But at a certain point, you look at what is unfolding and you think, no, sorry, it's, you know. So at the same time that I'm sitting next to Afik and I understand your experience and reality. And then I listened to you, Shauna, and I'm so proud of you for standing up with me and singing, because I know it's not easy. But that really is, for me, the whole point of this assemblage, is to bring us all together where we can understand each other and start to build the bridge.
This is my last one. Last one, I promise. I really appreciate you being honest and being brave enough, and everybody here for being brave and saying what they think. I know that Shalom Alliance, it has been an organized opposition, but I don't believe that they are the root of our opposition here in Montpelier. I have a lot of respect for fear that folks in Montpelier are feeling, the Jewish community is feeling, because we know that anti-Semitism is cyclical, and that no matter what your positionality is, you might not always feel that sense of safety, that you might not be a target, especially with the rise of fascism in this country, especially with people like Trump in office, with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens being some of our loudest microphones for Palestine solidarity. It's a terrible climate that we're in. So I just wanted to really say that with clarity, that as an organizer for Apartheid Free Community in Article 12, I grieve the fear that is happening, that I know is not because we're standing in Palestinian solidarity. It's fear that's rooted in centuries of anti-Semitism, of European white supremacy, of all of these histories that have affected us all in different ways. So when I say divesting, boycotting Israel, I'm not talking about Israeli Etsy artists. I'm talking about the $800,000 in Israeli bonds that the Vermont State Pension Fund is invested in, and the American laws that we are breaking, the Leahy Law, which is sending money to a government that we know is committing crimes against humanity. So I agree. I don't think anyone in this room believes that it's a zero-sum game, and that, like Wafiq said so beautifully, both groups need to win in order for either group to win. And I want to say that on behalf of our group.
Hi, my name is Ron Koss, and I live in East Montpelier. I would like to see two films, because in my experience over the years, there's two competing narratives. There's the Palestinian narrative, there's the Israeli narrative, and they're competing with each other. And
Talk into the mic.
Somebody, Miriam, thank you. And they're competing with each other. So the Oslo Accords were this, and the Palestinians always take an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And before Israel became a state, there was nothing in the land of Palestine. It was a desert. There was no farming. And so there are these narratives that exist, and they're competing. And someone will say to me, oh, well, in 2005 or 2006, Israel left Gaza. And what did we get? We got missiles. We got attacks. So these narratives that compete with each other create camps, and if you believe one narrative, then you're in that camp. You believe another, you're in that camp. And I think that if there was a film that kind of allowed these two narratives to be identified and to speak to each other, that maybe more people who are not here because they represent more of one side of the argument than the group of people that are here that are receptive to this film. I think that it would be very interesting and I think illuminating for that film to really bring these two narratives to life and let those narratives speak to each other, rather than these random conversations where people throw something out and then the other person doesn't even know what to say. The other thing is solutions. There are people who are talking about one state and two states and confederations, and I think that one of the things that's missing is that there's this ongoing belief that this conflict is going to go on for decades because maybe another generation or 2 generations, and I say no. I mean, there are all these people, young children, I mean, so many people suffering. I would love to see a film on the people who are championing solutions to this conflict. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Mosier. Loud enough? Okay. My question is, are there threats to the possibilities of major boycotts nationally as part of the resistance to the fascist regime? Because I know that Indivisible bill is building toward some major economic impact. And Minnesota provided a tremendous blueprint for me. So just getting away from the Israel-Palestinian thing, I'd love to know if we have to worry about that strategy and if there are legal barriers in the way.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so folks are going to have to remind me of what their questions were because I want to sort of address a few of them. I don't know that we're at a point right now where boycotts will be fully taken away from us, but I certainly know that we have a regime that would like to and has demonstrated at every step of the way that they will do what they can with, as it turns out, a very flawed system to strip us of our rights to protest. So I don't know personally of any bills that would stop people from engaging in a boycott, but there are plenty of anti-protest laws out there. There are laws that prevent people from wearing masks. There are laws that prevent people from blocking critical infrastructure. There are and by the way, most of these laws being passed by ALEC, by the American Legislative Exchange Council, drafted at ALEC and then passed around as these very anti-people laws. So it long preceded Trump. It is amplified with Trump. I don't know personally of any laws that are being introduced right now that would make it impossible for people on the street to boycott. Right now, these laws are about the state controlling whether an individual or a corporation is allowed to engage in a boycott. But I think anything's on the table at this point. Solutions, and there was also a comment. Oh yeah, I wanted to sort of follow up, and then there was a comment on coexistence, which I feel like I should now explain, what my perspective is on this. This is not just Vision's perspective. This is my perspective on coexistence work. So let's see. How do I get to all of those pieces? So I mentioned earlier that the sort of foundational Zionist ideology that is premised on full Jewish control over the land of historic Palestine, of Israel, of whatever you want to be calling it, that there are 3 logical conclusions of that. One of them is control over Palestinians, one of them is ethnically cleansing them, one of them is killing them. I am not saying that that's what Zionists want. I'm saying that the ideology, if you step back and you ask yourself, what does this ideology, how can this ideology come to full fruition? Those to me seem like the only 3 options that are available if the Zionism that won out in 1948 is the Zionism that continues to today. Does that make sense to folks? So the other piece that I will say is that that was not the only Zionism that existed. And so for many Jews, including folks like Martin Buber or Albert Einstein, Zionism was about a cultural revival of the Jewish people, or it was about a connection to the land without it being control over the land. There were many early Zionists that opposed ethno-nationalism because ethno-nationalism was the very thing that was killing Jews in Europe. And they said very, publicly, and they tried to promote this notion that if we set up the very same institutions that are murdering us, we will become the oppressors. We will become the murderers. In 1967, when Israel took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, Yeshayahu Leibowitz, who was a great Israeli philosopher, and many others said, if we maintain control over this land and we become oppressors of millions more Palestinians, it will be the moral corruption of the Jewish people. So I know that there are perspectives among Jews and even among some Zionists that believe in undoing of the political Zionism that won out in 1948. And so when we talk about solutions, I love what you said, Wafiq, right? It is an act of love. What does the end of patriarchy is? The end of patriarchy is obviously good for women, but it's really good for men too. The end of racism is good for those who are racist as well, right? We know these things, and we also know that decolonization is not just decolonization of land; it is decolonization of the mind and of all of the belief systems that have us, acting, behaving, setting policy in a particular way. When it comes to solutions. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a film like that as well. There's, if you follow, self-promotion here, but Local Call, which is our Hebrew language news site, Meron Rappaport is one of the editors at Local Call and one of the writers, and he's one of the co-writers of Proposal for a Confederacy. I'm ambivalent in some ways about what the solution looks like. And Just Vision is as well, by the way. Like we believe in the values. We believe in freedom, dignity, equality, equity. We want to see a political solution that addresses the needs, the concerns, the historical harms that have been caused. That might be a two-state solution. It might be a one-state solution. It might be a confederacy. I don't know. That's not my realm, and I don't even want to step into that realm. But I think Palestinians need to be taking a lead in advocating and calling for what it is that will allow them to be living with dignity and freedom and equity. And I have a very hard time seeing a solution that does not address that sort of foundational inconsistency in the Zionism that won out in 1948. I don't see a way for that to not be transformed, evolved, undone in some way or another. In the same way that apartheid, South Africa didn't cease to exist in 1992, 1991. Apartheid ceased to exist, right? South Africa became a different South Africa. I think Israel could become a different Israel. And I think the mechanisms that the world had in place, including the really courageous work, thank you, I don't remember your name in the back, who was engaged in the anti-apartheid struggle. I think that kind of work is just, it's stunning. It's beautiful to hear the success of those movements. And the other thing that I'll say is that the Jewish left is very small right now. And there are many in the Jewish left who use terminology like Jewish supremacy, and they talk about the end of Jewish supremacy as their number one priority. They fully support the boycott movement. I'm not speaking for all Israeli activists, but Israelis are calling for a boycott of the state of Israel because they realize the entire state is complicit, right? And it's not about punishing, like you said, and someone who's selling jewelry on Etsy who happens to be Israeli. This is about the institutions that are actively promoting, perpetuating crimes. And so, I see divestment, especially the kind of divestment that's really pinpointed, $800,000 in Israel bonds, for example. Those can be very effective strategies. What they're saying is that we as Americans are no longer going to accept the blind support that our government has which includes many of our tax dollars, to a regime that is committing a genocide, crimes against humanity, and so on. So those were a few things. Were there questions that anybody had that I didn't address in that last response? No? Are there any more questions? Oh yeah, we have one more question in the back there.
Get your workout in.
Hi, I'm Wendy Peterson. I'm a resident of Montpelier. I'm curious about what your perspective on what boycotting Israel actually looks like. I know that a lot of American corporations derive a lot of their revenue from contracts with Israel, particularly big tech. So, what does it look like? Is boycotting Israel basically meaning not using Google products, not using Apple products? I mean, what does it take?
I'm Tammy Calliope once again, and that's interesting that you should ask that question, because what I had to say was I just experienced, and it really is an experience, I had the experience of actually boycotting in the smallest way. Let's see, the CEOs of, I wrote to the CEOs of Microsoft, Amazon, Home Depot, and a couple of others that are complicit in the arms and in the arms to Israel. And I just wrote to each of these people, you have lost me as a customer. I will never buy anything from your store again, and this is the reason. And as I wrote it down, and I edited it till it was just, fierce but still, still there, I just felt this swelling up in me of joy and like it was a mitzvah that I had just, it was. I just suggest you all try it. It's the most basic level, but once you put out something like that to those big guys and say, to hell with you, I'm just not going to pay my money your way anymore, it's very satisfying.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think that people do it in different. I think there's a lot of different ways to boycott. There are some people that will only feel comfortable boycotting settlement products. Go for it and boycott settlement products, right? There's some folks that believe that boycotting the entire state of Israel is more important. Folks have, if you look at the BDS movement's website, they have a list of companies that they argue are complicit in the Israeli occupation or Israeli war crimes, and folks can go through that list and say, well, which are the ones that I feel I can do? I think that's a really big piece of it, is like, what are the things that you can do? Writing letters is really powerful. Shareholders, there was a big shareholder meeting after investigations came out, also by Local Call 972 and The Guardian, about Microsoft's involvement in providing the cloud servers that Israel was using to monitor and track Palestinian citizens across the West Bank and Gaza, and use those in some port, especially with Amazon services, to bomb targets in the Gaza Strip, right? So there was a huge shareholder movement within Microsoft shareholders that were pressuring Microsoft to end this program. They actually did end up limiting Israel's access to the servers because they said that Israel was violating the agreement that they had signed about how those servers would be used. So, there's shareholder pressure, there's writing letters and petitions, there's withholding your money, and certainly I'd say the most important thing that you can do is educate yourself, right? Like, you can come across a social media post that say, like, don't buy, Israeli dates, don't buy this, don't buy that, right? Do the research and figure out, well, okay, why is that boycott being called for? Who's calling for that boycott? Is this something that I agree with, and is it something that I feel is going to have some kind of an impact? And so I'd say, start with the education piece. There are great resources and great organizations out there to really explore how your boycott can be effective if you choose to boycott. Yeah, please.
It can be very small things, right? We don't have to do giant things. I'm not going to buy another Hewlett-Packard printer. I didn't realize what I saw there today, and they kind of obfuscated it at the end with their quote, but it's fairly safe to assume that, you can buy an Epson, right? So don't, it's those kinds of little things. They don't have to be heroic. Just care. Just don't decide that nothing I do is going to matter. That is our biggest enemy. And you hear it all the time. Oh, nothing we say matters. We can't do anything about it. And it just makes your blood boil. We can't do giant things about it, but we can do little things about it. And if we do a lot of little things about it, you know how it goes. So little, courage, caring, that's how you boycott.
Can I say one other thing is that support your politicians that are taking a stand, because that's, we've seen over and over again how fundraised anybody who dares to speak out against Israeli policy is, right? Very, very heavily out fundraised. The remarkable thing about Zoran Mamdani's rise to power is that he started out as a New York assemblyman who basically decided to put Palestine on the ballot, and he bet against the odds, right? Everyone said, don't touch this, you will lose and you're ending your political career, along with several other New York Assembly people, but also politicians across the country who are essentially saying, like, actually at this point it's a liability for me to not include Palestinian rights among the many rights that I struggle for as a progressive. And so, voicing your support for politicians that are taking the risk, I think, is also an important thing that we can do.
I want to add one more thing. For the people who are scared that anti-Semitism going to increase if Article 12 going to pass, I'll give you an example of the 5 municipalities passed it last year. I don't see anti-Semitism risen up in Winooski, in Brattleboro. We cannot take the fear as an excuse not to do the right thing. Time of genocide, of ethnic cleansing, of starvation needs courage. Standing to ICE needs courage. Protecting children needs courage too. Not because you're not feeling well about it. It means you have to oppose it. If anti-Semitism win, and it is rising up because of the right taking advantage of the Palestinian cause, it's hurting us the most. And if somebody you want to stand by you, it's me. Yes. It's me.
I can't remember what I was going to say. I do want to say before we end, and that's not to say that we're ending, but I do want to say that some of us are, after we clear everything, and if folks want to help with chairs, that would be great. But some of us will gather at Positive Pie, and feel free to join if you want to continue the conversation, because I can't remember what I was going to say.
There was a question.
Eric Bachman is my name. You were talking, Daniel, about not knowing which solution is the best. And then you went to values. And I find that a very interesting question. And my thought is, are values a way of helping people with different solutions in mind to get together and to talk? Because if you're competing about solutions, it's not going to get very far at all. But I think a lot of us have the same or similar values or similar needs, be kind to each other, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to list them all. But I was wondering if that's a key, do you think, in helping people get together who have different basic solutions in mind?
I do. It's what I keep coming back to. And, I'm actually from Canada, so Vermont has always felt like another home to me. But I live in Kentucky right now, where the vast majority of my neighbors are strong Trump supporters. And they are an incredible community. And we connect on values. There are certain values that we do not share. But there are many that we do. And I'm struck. A lot of, especially my Canadian family, is like, you live in Kentucky? What's that like? I'm like, well, I have really nice neighbors, and they would totally have my back if something happened. And so yeah, I think is also on this issue, right? We should be interrogating what our values are. If our value is the sanctity of human life, it's that, if we believe that that is a fundamental value, then we can't justify away violence against civilians and the taking of human lives. Whether you are a Hamas supporter or you're a State of Israel supporter, it doesn't matter. If your value is the sanctity of civilian human life, then something's not adding up, right? And so I think the least we can do if we're sitting around a table together is interrogate our values and support each other also in asking, well, is your value being upheld in this particular circumstance? If not, how can we change that particular circumstance so that you can be acting in integrity in your support of X, Y, Z? So, yeah, I think to me, it's a really important framework, and it's sort of what I do to keep myself sane as I have these kinds of conversations with folks. And I also want to encourage people, before we leave, please do sign up for our newsletter. You'll get our breaking investigations around our journalism, updates about our filmmaking. You will get annoying fundraising emails. You can always just delete those if you want to, but I think we do share a lot of really important resources, and we'd love to have you on that list.
And I just wanted to say, so I have a background in restorative justice, and in restorative justice, that is exactly the sort of thing that we do, is we lead with values. It's like the step one of addressing like a building community or addressing any sort of conflict, things of that nature. And when we're trying to come up with solutions, when we're trying to decide what the best policy is, solutions have to be secondary to what our stated goals are. We have to be able to have conversations as to what our shared goals are, what we're trying to strive for, before we can actually have a conversation of like how to achieve that goal. So all to say is like, I do think that what we need is to have those open and frank conversations about what it is that we value, what it is we're trying to promote as a society, and then when we have those shared values, then coming up with the solutions becomes a little bit easier. So yeah, I'm not sure what the best policy solutions are, but what I can say is if we first start with values and where our shared commonalities are, then that's where I think a majority of the work is, and then everything else comes a little secondary.
I finally remembered. So when I was talking to Daniel about all this, I was really astonished to hear that there are now more states that have this legislation on the books, 38 states, including California, Illinois, Minnesota, the states that we're looking to as examples of states that are really standing up to ICE. And I thought, what the heck? So I and partly I want to ask this question because it's being filmed, because I want other people to know about this. So this, if it mentions Israel, you can just get it passed. This goes way beyond the people we saw in this film. This goes to the bastions of, what we're hoping is going to help turn the tide. So maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I guess so. It was just a bipartisan issue for so long, and it was an issue that nobody wanted to go against. So if, like we saw with the state legislator, was like, oh, I didn't really remember that being brought up until somebody mentioned something on Facebook. I'd say that's the vast majority of lawmakers that voted for these laws. You have those that are strongly promoting it, like Senator Hester. There's a strong, those that are very strongly lobbying for those kinds of laws. And then there's your lawmakers who are like, oh, this is about Israel. Sure, right? That's shifting now, and I think it's really important that it's shifting, right? There is, I would say, an awakening among lawmakers, and there's also a bunch of lawmaker trailblazers that are letting us know that we don't have to blindly support it, and that if our values are to stop ICE, and if our values are to struggle for immigrant rights and racial justice, that Palestine also needs to be the issue that is core to our principles because of the overlap in all of those issues. And yeah, I don't know, New York, for example, it didn't pass the legislature, and when it didn't pass the legislature, Cuomo just passed it as an executive order, right? And there are a few states like that. New Hampshire has an executive order as well. So why? Why are they doing that? Why is that so important to them? They're just pandering to voters. There's no ideology there. I don't think so anyways. Maybe there is, maybe Cuomo has some other reason. But yeah, I think the best we can do is to continue educate, show films like this, engage our constituents, and really encourage, especially the wave of repeal bills right now, because I do think there will be more repeal bills. Maybe that's naive of me, but I'm hopeful to see the ones that have been coming in, and I think that they're really important. I should also say we could just continue this conversation.
Sorry, go ahead. Hey, well, I just want to say, I'm Marlene. I'm also from apartheid-free Montpelier. I wanted to, just address the boycott, and anything you can do is so important, any little thing. I've come from activism since I was 18 years old. In California, during when my brother was shipped out to the Iraq War, he was a Navy SEAL, he had to deal with horrific things, to moving to New York City, to, dealing, 2004, I was arrested, and I dealt with New York and the militarization of the police and them getting training with the IDF, and this has subjects there. I was arrested. I spent time in jail in New York City because of that. Anything you can do with a boycott is really, really important. And a lot of those big companies that we're trying to boycott that are tied to Israel and supporting IDF, supporting the horrific things that are happening over there, are also the same companies that are invested into ICE, that are invested into all of the militarization here of the LAPD, NYPD, ICE, everything. It's the same companies. So it's really important that we stand behind that together, and that's like what Wafiq was saying with unification with love and with compassion, and what you were saying with just we need to find our values and our morals, and they line up exactly the same, and we just need people to see that. And I wanted to say for anyone like looking to what little you can do, there are boycott apps. So if you're shopping, they have scanners on them. One is called No Thanks, and one is called Boycott. Boycat. They're the two bigger ones, and you can just put them on your phone, and then when you're shopping, you can scan, and it'll tell you that this supports, military and weaponry going to Israel. So this company supports that. So, it's Boycat, Boycat, and No Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'm also with Apartheid Free Communities. I'm sorry I missed this, but I was out door knocking in Montpelier to let people know about Article 12. So if anyone is interested in having a lawn sign for Article 12, we have them in my car right now. So let me know, raise your hand, whatever. I would love to get you those. Thank you.
So why don't you be visible on
Does Miriam want to have? You want to have a closing word?
Miriam, would you like to have a closing word?
This is like the end of a bar mitzvah. All the food is gone and everybody's like, okay, must be over. I just want to tell everybody how much I appreciate you. It's wonderful to see you all here. We're going to clean up and we're going to reconvene for a very brief moment at Positive Pie just to have a bite to eat. So if you want to join us, please feel free. I think I made a beginning at building a bridge. That was the whole point. Thanks to Daniel and Jordan.